For years, Prince Naseem Hamed made boxing look easy, hands down, smiling, untouchable. World champions couldn't solve him, promoters built events around him, fans bought tickets just to watch his entrance. He was 35-0, 31 knockouts, the lineal featherweight champion of the world, Forbes' top paid athletes list, a net worth that had crossed 40 million pounds before his 27th birthday. And then on April 7th, 2001, inside the MGM Grand Garden Arena in Las Vegas, he met a fighter who did not care about the show. No reaction to the entrance, no frustration at the trash talk, no adjustment to the chaos. Just 12 rounds of the most surgical dismantling in featherweight history. And in one night, Prince Naseem Hamed lost more than just a fight. He lost the illusion. Antonio Barrera, the baby-faced assassin. When this fight was announced, Barrera was installed as a 3-1 underdog. The British press laughed. American oddsmakers barely blinked. Thousands of British fans flew to Las Vegas to watch their prince defend his legacy. Nobody thought Barrera had a chance, and Barrera knew that. Here's what the betting public didn't bother to check. Barrera had already been through the fire, twice beaten by Junior Jones. Then a savage trilogy against Eric Morales, some of the bloodiest, most brutal fights of the decade. A man who had been counted out, come back, evolved, and arrived in Las Vegas with 65 wins and the calm disposition of someone who had absolutely nothing left to prove to himself. While Naz was on a trapeze, and we'll get to that, Barrera was in Big Bear, California. Altitude training, 12-week camp, studying every piece of Hamed film ever made. Not to copy him, to solve him. In this episode, we go round by round through the fight that ended the Naseem Hamed era. We'll break down exactly how Barrera executed one of the greatest tactical game plans in boxing history, and we'll show you the specific moments where the whole thing fell apart for Naz. This is the episode that explains why talent and discipline are not the same thing, why being the best in the building on natural gifts alone is never enough when the opponent across from you has turned every single weakness into a target. That's what it means when someone is genuinely forged by pressure, not just tested once, but remade by the fire until the fire has nothing left to burn. Stay locked in. This one is heavy. Let's go back to the 6 months before this fight, because this is where the real story starts. August 2000, Naz beats Augie Sanchez in Connecticut, wins by knockout in 4 rounds. Looks dominant, clean performance, but he breaks his right hand badly in the process. Needs surgery, can't train, 6 months off, and during those 6 months, he gains 35 pounds on a featherweight, a man who fights at 126 pounds on fight night. He gained more than a quarter of his fighting weight sitting on the couch. When the Barrera fight was signed for November 2000, originally slated for March 3rd, 2001, before being pushed to April 7th, Naz started training, but the weight cut was brutal and the preparation was compromised before it even got going. He fired Brendan Ingle, the man who built him from age 7, in 1998. He'd been working with different trainers since. For the Barrera fight, the legendary Emmanuel Stewart arrived at his Palm Springs camp 3 weeks before fight night. What Stewart found there is now boxing folklore. He walked into camp and watched Naz go through his Mexican sparring partners, men brought in specifically to mimic Barrera's style, his southpaw angles, his counterpunching, and Naz treated them like warm-up exercises. He didn't take them seriously. He didn't adjust. He sparred against Barrera's blueprint like it was a Tuesday afternoon at the gym. Meanwhile, in Big Bear, 2 hours up the mountain, Barrera was training like the fight was next morning, every day, full intensity. His corner was already inside Hamed's head in the planning stage, and Hamed hadn't even noticed. Stewart said publicly afterwards that he was worried from the moment he walked in. He could see the gap, and he couldn't close it in 3 weeks. The signs were all there. Naz was arriving to this fight overweight, underprepared, and, perhaps most dangerously, completely convinced he would win, because that's the trap that catches even the best fighters. When success comes easily for long enough, the preparation starts to feel optional. The work starts to feel like formality rather than foundation. And then one night, against one opponent who did the work you didn't, those seconds 91 arrive. The last 91 seconds before it all falls apart, and the only thing that stands between you and the loss is the preparation. If it isn't there, nothing else saves you. April 7th, 2001, MGM Grand Arena, Las Vegas, Nevada. The card is billed as Playing with Fire. The pay-per-view goes out on HBO. Jim Lampley, Larry Merchant, George Foreman, calling it ringside. 310,000 pay-per-view buys. Thousands of British fans who flew across the Atlantic. The MGM Grand Arena packed. Barrera walks to the ring first. Blue and silver trunks. Poker face. He looks like a man heading to a business meeting. No theatrics, no acknowledgement of the crowd, just the walk. Larry Merchant, watching him come in, says, "Bring in the clown, bring in the fighter, same guy, I love it." He's talking about Hamed. It's meant as affection. Within an hour, it'll sound like prophecy. Then the fireworks go off at the back of the arena. Hamed's entrance begins. He's on a trapeze, a genuine suspended trapeze bar, being carried above the crowd toward the ring. The British fans go nuclear. The Las Vegas crowd is amazed. And this is one of those boxing moments that feels like the universe trying to tell you something. Someone throws a beer. It hits Hamed mid-air. He gets lowered back down, walks the rest of the way to the ring like a regular human being. No backflip, no somersault, steps through the ropes. For the first time in his professional career, Naseem Hamed entered a boxing ring the same way everybody else does. The opening bell. And immediately something is wrong. Not for Barrera, for Hamed. Because Barrera does something that Naz has never had to deal with consistently across 12 rounds in his entire career. He gives up the center of the ring, voluntarily, on purpose. He backs up, stays on the outside, circles to his left, on which is away from Naz's loaded left hand, and waits. He wants Naz to come forward, to commit, to overextend, to do exactly what Naz always does. And Naz, who has been the bait setter his entire career, suddenly finds himself being the one chasing for the first time in 12 years. He doesn't know what to do with it. In round 1, less than a minute in, Barrera launches 2 left hook bombs to the body. They land flush. Lampley is hollering, gets to the body, wobbled Naz with a left hook upstairs. The crowd inside the MGM erupts. On his feet, barely 60 seconds in, Naz already has swelling around his right eye. Round 1 goes to Barrera, cleanly. Round 2, and this is where you see how carefully Barrera prepared. Both men clinch and both go to the canvas together. A chaotic, almost comedic tumble. And while they're on the floor, Barrera, apparently deciding the rules are more of a suggestion tonight, throws a right hand. Joe Cortez immediately issues a warning. Las Vegas police and Nevada State Athletic Commission officials actually climb onto the ring apron. It's a moment, but here's what matters tactically. Barrera's body shot game was already opening Naz up. The left hook to the body was doing 2 things simultaneously, hurting Naz and bringing his guard down. Every time Hamed tried to cover the body, his head was exposed. Every time he kept his guard high, the body was the target. It was a combination that required weeks of calculated preparation to build, and it was working perfectly. Round 3, Hamed starts throwing more volume. He's trying to find the answer in his natural weapon, the left hand. The problem is Barrera is circling away from it every single time. Naz's big left lands in air. Barrera counters off the miss. The crowd is already sensing this isn't going the way they expected. And here's the thing about Naseem Hamed in those early rounds. He wasn't quitting. He wasn't scared. He was trying. But effort without the right preparation isn't enough against a man who's been studying your patterns for months. Being built for fighters doesn't just mean having the heart. It means doing the specific work, the boring work, the repetitive work, the work that feels irrelevant until the night it saves you. Naz had the heart. He was just missing the homework. By rounds 4, 5, and 6, a pattern had crystallized. Every trick in the Prince's arsenal was being neutralized in real time. Hands down, Barrera had drilled counters to that exact position for months. The moment Naz's guard dropped, a left jab was already snapping his head backward. Not a power shot, a measuring jab. One that said, I know where your chin is. I know it every single time you lower your hands. Leaning back, Barrera had solved the geometry. Instead of chasing the lean, he circled around it. Hamed's lean back counter worked because opponents followed him into it. Barrera simply wasn't there when Naz straightened up. The southpaw switch? Barrera had studied every pattern. He'd watched hundreds of rounds of tape specifically to map out when Naz switched stances and why. By fight time, he anticipated it almost before it happened. Round 4, Hamed gets rocked again at the start. He has a slightly better moment, lands some combinations, but Barrera's defense absorbs them and counters efficiently. The round goes to Barrera. Round 5, Hamed's best round. He's more aggressive, more active, throws a higher volume, lands some shots. For a moment, the crowd senses a shift, but Barrera absorbs every clean punch and responds with more accurate counters. He is not going anywhere. Round 6 through round 9, Barrera controls almost completely. Not by chasing knockdowns, not by being reckless, by being precisely, consistently, exhaustingly correct. Every time Hamed loaded the left, Barrera wasn't there. Every time Hamed dropped his hands to taunt, a habit that had been a weapon for 12 years, Barrera made him pay for it with a jab or a left hook. The swagger started to vanish. The smiling started to disappear. The hands behind the back taunting, which had been Naz's psychological weapon for his entire career, stopped because doing it meant getting hit. And the crowd, thousands of British fans who'd flown to Las Vegas specifically for this, started to go quiet because what they were watching wasn't Prince Naseem dominating, it was Prince Naseem surviving. And that's a painful thing to witness when you've watched someone be genuinely transcendent for 6 years. When the magic stops working, you don't just see the loss, you see everything the magic was hiding. Every camp that was a week too short, every sparring session where the respect wasn't there, every pound that had to be lost in the last 3 weeks, talent that was never fully made under pressure, never stress tested against someone who had done the work to match it, is talent that eventually meets its ceiling. That night in Las Vegas, in front of 300,000 pay-per-view viewers, Naseem Hamed found his. By the championship rounds 10, 11, 12, Emmanuel Stewart in Hamed's corner knew the scorecard reality. Only a knockout was changing this outcome. The decision was gone. The judges had seen the same fight everyone else had seen, and Barrera, on those scorecards, was winning clearly. Round 10 offered the briefest hope. Barrera, perhaps fatigued, perhaps slightly complacent, lingered too long with his back to the ropes. Hamed landed some dangerous shots, isolated power punches that actually threatened. The crowd stirred. Maybe there's still something here. Barrera felt it, reset, and went back to the game plan. Round 11, Hamed was swinging, not boxing, swinging. Wild left hooks looking for the one knockout punch that could rewrite 12 rounds of losing. It was desperate, it was brave, and it wasn't working. Round 12, Barrera, for the first time in 12 rounds, abandoned his back foot discipline and went on the attack. He'd earned the right, he knew the scorecards, and he wanted to finish with a statement. He threw and landed in combination, heavy shots. Hamed still coming forward, still swinging, still trying. Then, a wild left hook from Hamed misses completely. Barrera catches him, locks him in a full Nelson, and literally slams his face into the top turnbuckle. Referee Joe Cortez immediately deducts a point from Barrera. It doesn't matter, not even slightly. The scorecards are 116 to 111, 115 to 112, 115 to 112, all for Barrera by a wide margin that no single point was going to bridge. Unanimous decision. Marco Antonio Barrera wins, and when the final bell rang, Barrera walked to the center of the ring with his arms raised. Naz was in his own corner. Larry Merchant's call summed up the entire evening in one sentence. Can there be any doubt? Tremendous celebration in Barrera's corner, and Prince Naseem is wandering around aimlessly in his own. Wandering around aimlessly. In 12 years of professional boxing, nobody had ever used those words to describe Naseem Hamed. After the fight, Hamed said he wanted the rematch immediately. He had a clause in the contract, had to invoke it within 2 months. He never did. The 2 months passed. Barrera moved on, and Prince Naseem Hamed went quiet. He sat out 13 months, the longest stretch of inactivity of his entire career. When he finally returned, May 18th, 2002, it was against Manuel Calvo, a relatively unknown Spanish fighter with a decent record but no world title pedigree. A soft return fight designed to ease him back and rebuild momentum. He won by unanimous decision, but it wasn't a vintage performance, and he knew it, and everyone watching knew it. 2 months after the Calvo fight, Naseem Hamed announced his retirement. He was 28 years old. 28, an age when most elite fighters are just entering their prime. Manny Pacquiao was still winning world titles at 39. Bernard Hopkins fought at 51. Joe Calzaghe retired at 36 undefeated. Naz walked away at 28 with a busted right hand, 36 wins, 31 knockouts, and a single loss that had apparently taken something from him that he could never fully get back. Not the ability, not the power, not the reflexes, the belief, because the illusion of invincibility, once shattered, is one of the hardest things in professional sports to rebuild. And Naseem Hamed, who had built his entire identity on the certainty that he could not be beaten, never found a way to operate without it. And that's the real lesson of April 7th, 2001. Not that Barrera was better on that night, though he absolutely was. Not that Naz lacked courage. He fought through 12 hard rounds and never stopped trying. The lesson is about what happens when you stop being built for fighters in the truest sense. When the building stops. When the pressure of the work is replaced by the comfort of the reputation. When the fire that forged you stops burning because you decided the forge was no longer necessary. The Prince had the gift. He had the talent. What he no longer had on that night in that camp in those 6 months on a couch was the obsession that made all of it work. Let's get specific, because the Barrera outworked Hamed narrative is true, but it undersells exactly how brilliant the game plan was. Barrera identified 3 specific weapons that had won every fight in Naz's career, and he neutralized all 3 before the first bell rang. Weapon 1, the counter left hand. Naz's knockout punch. It worked because opponents attacked him, they fell into empty space, and the left came through the gap. Barrera's answer, don't attack. Give up the center ring. Make Hamed come forward. If Hamed's the aggressor, the counter doesn't work the same way. Problem solved. Weapon 2, the psychological edge. Naz won fights before the bell rang by making opponents feel inferior. The entrance, the trash talk, the hands behind the back. Barrera's answer, be completely indifferent to all of it. Walk to the ring like you're going to collect your paycheck. Don't react to the theatrics. Don't get emotional. Don't give Naz anything to feed off. A showman without an audience is just someone standing in the middle of the ring. Weapon 3, explosive unpredictability. Hamed's movement was impossible to track because it had no pattern. He improvised in real time based on what opponents gave him. Barrera's answer, give him nothing. Stand off, circle, counter, reduce the variables, make the fight boring if you have to. Force Naz to adapt because Naz had never had to adapt. 3 weapons, 3 answers. Prepared in Big Bear over 12 weeks. Executed over 12 rounds in Las Vegas. That's not luck. That's not a fluke. That's one of the most complete tactical performances the sport has ever seen at featherweight. But boxing never stays still, and history has a way of finding new bodies to try old stories on. Because right now, in 2024 and into 2025, there's a fighter in the light heavyweight division who is making boxing ask a very familiar question. He fights with his hands low. He uses angles nobody expects. He taunts mid-fight. He's got elite timing and genuine knockout power and a personality that fills arenas. His name is Ben Whitaker, and the similarities to Naseem Hamed, when style, in attitude, and the way he makes elite opponents look confused and ordinary are not subtle. But this series was always building to one final question. Is Whitaker the next evolution of the Prince? A fighter who learned from Naz's blueprint and builds a longer, more disciplined legacy? Or is history about to repeat itself? Because the one thing we know for certain, and after 4 episodes and one of the greatest falls in featherweight history, the showman never sees the technician coming, not until it's too late. In boxing, talent gets attention, but discipline writes history. That's been the through line of this entire series. And episode 5, the final one, is where we find out whether the lessons of the past were learned or forgotten. Subscribe to Knockout Kings Elite right now if you haven't already. Hit the bell, you're in the middle of the best boxing series on this platform and you're not losing the thread at episode 4. Drop a comment. Could Naseem Hamed have beaten Barrera if the camp had been right? Be specific. We want the debate, and episode 5 is coming. The story isn't finished.